Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hi, everyone. It's another fun episode of the Mimi and Greg Show. For those that read Greg Rucka's incredible Lazarus comic, you will notice some disturbing similarities between the world he built to the one we are living in today. Greed, imbalance of wealth, and inequality are major themes in the comic. We discuss these parallels and the research and creative decisions he made in regards to world building. Since I've been reading Lazarus and Black Magic, I'm selfishly asking Greg questions about these stories, but please feel free to send in your own questions for Greg Rucka, as we're doing some listener question episodes in the upcoming weeks. For those that don't already know, Greg Rucka is a New York Times best-selling author of hundreds of comics and nearly 24 novels. He is also the writer for the hit film The Old Guard, starring Charlize Theron. I'm loving these conversations and hope you are too. If you are, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you'd like to help support and keep this podcast going with a donation, I'd certainly appreciate it. You can become a Patreon of the show on my website or patreon.com/sifumimichan. For comments or suggestions, email me at mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now on with the show. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Mimi. How are you today?
I'm good, except now I think it's Thursday because we normally record on a Thursday and it's Tuesday.
Right,
so I'm going to think it's
Tuesday.
like half the week's over and it's still just.
So we should, when is this going to go out?
This will go out on Saturday.
Okay, so saying Happy Thanksgiving serves no purpose. Okay.
Well, we could still say Happy Thanksgiving. You know.
No, it's fine.
We hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving.
We wouldn't want to ruin it. It's okay.
You could never ruin anything.
Oh, don't.
Not on the Mimi and Greg show, anyway.
Boy, are you sadly mistaken, but all right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, but I am grateful that you decided to allow us to reschedule since we will be falling on a lot of holidays, but I figured December, I'll give you quite a break.
Though I think come
December will give you quite a break.
The December holidays, we'll
take a little hiatus. Agreed. So I usually take a break anyway from the podcast and do a lot of re-podcasts.
For everybody who can see this, ha 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 ha. I am drinking my tea, and this is the winter spice tea that you sent me.
Nice.
So thank you.
Is it wintry and spicy?
It is very nice. It's got some cinnamon and a star anise sort of thing.
Okay.
Going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, very fall, very seasonal.
Yeah. I tend to like black teas or green teas.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not a big herbal tea guy.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's lovely. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm quite pleased.
All right.
Very good. You did well.
All right. Well, the thing about the seasonals, it's a hit or miss, but also if you love it, it's like you can only get it when the season comes around. And then if you know,
and then you got to buy in bulk.
You have to buy in bulk. Yeah. So, but such are the ways of gifts. And for our listeners, it's like, what is going on? Also, Greg will be celebrating a birthday, so we can say happy birthday because that will be pretty much the day after this releases.
I will, in fact, it will be the day after this releases.
Yeah.
It will be my birthday, yes.
And so that's a celebration that the day Greg came into the world.
Again, you seem
you're like, what do you want? What are you up to?
Yeah, you seem really committed to this. Like it's a good thing.
So it is a good thing because I told you off air, like, I wrote down some notes for today because I've been reading. And obviously I'm a huge fan and I read your stuff, but The Last Lazarus Risen had come out weeks ago. So it's not like I read it every night. Once I've read it, I move on. But lately, as you know, I've been campaigning for everyone I know to read Lazarus. And so I've committed in my book club for them to read Lazarus. So that means I get to reset, and I started at 1.
Oh, so you're rereading
I'm rereading all of it. And so is Oscar. So Oscar had read everything except he stopped right before the X66. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the mini.
He stopped before that. So he hasn't read any of the Risen yet. He was going to like let them kind of add up because he kind of like me likes to binge. But now he's rereading it. And we convinced my book club to read it, which of course I said, well, I was scared because I talk so highly about it and I want them to love it so much that I'm afraid. So I was like, God, I'm afraid they're not going to love it.
There is nothing worse than being like, this thing is so good. I love it so much. And you finally get people to like, be like, sure, I'll try it. And then they come back and they're like, yeah, I just, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, but
yes.
So no, I get that fear.
Oh my God. So
I feel that I feel that way every time I convince somebody to try Ted Lasso.
Okay.
I'm afraid they're going to be like, I don't know what you saw in this.
Yeah, because you're so passionate about it and you love it, you enjoy it. It gives you pleasure and excitement. And so I was like a little nervous because obviously my book club, we've been doing a lot of reading. We've done we've gone all over. As you know, we tried the Brothers Karamazov. That was a failed thing, but we loved Musashi, which was an epic thing. So it was like we've been all over, and typically we like the same books. Like we've been like yay for the same ones and nay for the same ones. And we had them read Neil Gaiman's Graveyard Book because Oscar and I love the Graveyard Book because it's kind of basically the Jungle Book but in a graveyard, and I love the Jungle Book. So we were so excited for them to read it, and they didn't love it, and we were like, oh no. And again, for me, a lot of it's audio because I do audiobook, and so I was like, well, maybe it's just I really love the audiobook because it was the reading, and it's like. So I felt the same way, and I said, oh my God, tell me how you guys are liking Lazarus. So like, oh, we like Lazarus. And I was like, oh, and they're like, but we already knew we liked Rucka's writing. It's that Neil Gaiman that, is a hard sell. I'm like, I have to tell Greg this.
Those are words that have never before been spoken.
There you guys, like, I have to tell you this. So like, well, we already knew we liked Greg Rucka's writing because, they had just read the Kodiak novels. So they're like, but yeah, Neil Gaiman, that was, I don't know. And so, cause I guess, one of them had tried to read American Gods and just could not get into it. And I felt the same way, actually. I couldn't get into it. So I was like, okay, I get what you're saying. But generally speaking, he's a pretty solid writer, that Neil Gaiman guy.
Yeah, he's not bad.
So, but I thought you would enjoy the compliment that they're like, oh, well, we already know we love Rucka, but
no, that's a delight. That's a genuine delight.
So we've been submerged in your stuff, and so of course reading Lazarus brings up all these thoughts because we are in that dystopian future.
So are you about to hit me with a bunch of Lazarus questions?
I have some. Yes, I have some. But
all right.
Sidebar. Oscar's reading too fast because he's like, God, it's so damn good.
He's already through.
He can't stop. And we're like, stop. The book club hasn't discussed Conclave. We're gonna discuss after Conclave. And he just can't stop. And so I said, why don't you read Black Magic? Because it's something I just recently started because I hadn't gotten on that train yet. And he's got a bunch of Black Magic questions for you now because now I got him to stop reading Lazarus and I pushed him to that one. So
and you switched him to this other one.
Yes. So basically, this is what I mean. This is why we're
going to have some fun.
I'm in such grateful Rucka mode because literally, like, I have been talking to you and then now I'm like reading off air. And so, like, yes, you are very present.
Now I can completely overwhelm you in every corner of your life. Excellent.
Yeah, you just need to come out with your next like music album and
like, there you go. Barely.
Right. Because then I could watch The Old Guard on Netflix, and then I could read, and then you just got to get all the media down.
You're making me feel like I do a lot, and I'm not sure I do.
See, this is a good reminder for you then. But I guess let me start with Lazarus because it's so. And it's something I talked to Angela about, who releases tomorrow, by the way. And, actually, you'll like this, too, because I told her, well, it's been great. Obviously, I've been talking to Greg a lot. She goes, well, how often do you guys talk? I'm like, oh, weekly since March. She's like, weekly? I was like, yeah, weekly. She goes, that's a lot of Rucka.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, but I enjoy
it. And bless Angela for putting into words what I'm sure most of your listeners think. So
No, they want more. But she said the same thing, which is Lazarus is very like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like now. And I just saw a post from Robert Reich. How do you say his last name? Robert Reich. And basically, like, Elon Musk takes the second place for richest man over Gates. Yep. And I mean, we're looking at literally this dystopian future of Lazarus, where it's the wealthy are the ones in power, and it's not really or political. But
let's see what the Oxfam Wealth Inequality 2019 report. There were 2,153 billionaires in 2019. This is before the pandemic. Together, they have the same amount of wealth as of the poorest 4.6 billion, that's a B, people in the world, according to Oxfam, the nonprofit aimed at alleviating global poverty. Yeah, it just gets worse. Billionaire fortunes grew by 2.5 billion a day last year. That was their report as of January 2019. And we know, it has been widely reported, and I do think, regardless of whether or not you follow his politics, Robert Reich is an economist. Right. His data is good. And the wealth growth amongst the Bezoses and the Musks and their ilk, the profiteering, and it is profiteering, that has been made since the pandemic really came down in the U.S., never mind globally. In the U.S. it's grotesque. You see reports and people who do the math and say, so literally Jeff Bezos could give everybody, thousands of dollars and he would still be the richest man in the world. And one has to ask, how much is enough? Yeah. How much do you need?
Yeah.
There's a Le Carré line that I think of. I think it's from Tinker Tailor, and it is not at all. It isn't relevant to economics, but the phraseology applies, where a character says, "We've had enough. We've had a bellyful." In fact, and I believe it's Smiley's internal monologue isn't like, all people who have had a bellyful, they want more. And that's capitalism in a nutshell.
Yeah, I saw that today, and I was like, oh gosh. And now I'm like submerged into the Lazarus world again. And I just finished Lift, and Oscar just said to me, yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like now, like, I feel like it's very relevant. And my cousin just said, I didn't even know this. I didn't know how bad, and it makes us feel so bad because we're wrapped up in our worlds, but how bad the hunger problem is, where you see lines of people waiting just to get a meal. And
in the US,
right? It's not a third world country, or
you got it.
It's like,
it ain't Russia in the 70s, kids. It's the footage of food lines in Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a saying that says there are three things, you need to have a revolution. And, one of them is like, I can't remember precisely what it is. One of them is something like gross inequality, right? Oppression, starvation. And the US has had the first two in abundance, but we've managed to stave off the third because we have really shitty food that's available for cheap, right? This is why we have a diabetes and obesity epidemic in this country. Yeah. The second people start going hungry, there is nothing left to lose, right? We can endure a whole lot, but if you're gonna die slow anyway, then there's nothing keeping you from picking up a gun or a pitchfork or making a Molotov cocktail and going out there and trying to live. And it is kind of scary, when you look and you go like, we're kind of racing in on this.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, and I've said before, we started Lazarus. It was a cautionary tale, and now it's a documentary.
Yeah. I know, which is fascinating.
It wasn't intended that way.
Right. It's fascinating, but horrifying at the same time.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
That whole visual in Lift, and kudos, of course, to Michael Lark, who just makes it so like visually in one panel, you just get the whole feel of the land, right? You just see it. And I thought that whole like too late, too little, too late. It's like, they're the poor family, Casey and Michael, like their family, they're sitting there waiting, the Barretts, they're waiting for help. They're begging for help. They're like, oh yeah, it's coming. And we really need this. And then they get home the next morning, their house is destroyed. And the guy's like, calls up. He's like, great news.
Yeah, we got it on the way. Yeah,
it's on the way. And you just.
And by the way, you're going to be charged for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, you could just see other families though here, right? Like we're talking US, like you could just feel that same pain where nobody wants to give us any help and you finally get approved. I mean, and there's all these roadblocks, and by then it's too late. Like heaven forbid someone may have died because of the inequality or something even crazier than just losing your home, which is bad enough. Yeah. But I mean, you see the housing inequality here and the fact that it's causing, and the poverty, the wealth inequality is causing all of these things that people complain about. Like I've been enlightened by this task force that I'm on, and it's just hearing so many people talk about the situation in so many of these neighborhoods. And that's why there's education issues, because they don't go to school, because they have, it's just that it's like a compiling snowball effect. And so it's like, but it's all back to that wealth inequality. And and it's such a, you think about the billions on that first top 10 list, and it blows your mind.
It is an astronomical amount of money. I mean, it is an inconceivable amount of money. That it is. I knew a guy growing up. I used to go to a summer camp pretty regularly from about the time I was 9 to maybe 19, 20. I was a counselor there for several years and so on. And I had a friend who I met through that camp very early on, like when I was 9 or 10. And he was the son of an attorney who lived in Santa Cruz, California. And his dad was very much a 60s radical who had gone into the law. And so he had sort of put that on his son, and the guy's name was Marty, and Marty was really smart and really sweet, but he was always a little left. He was always quirky, weird, but and not in that I'm cool, but in this unself-conscious, this is the way I think and this is what I'm doing. And I remember one summer I see him at camp. We got there and I forget what's going on. He tells me I'm counting to 1 million. And I said, "You're what?" And he said, "I decided I wanted to count to 1 million. So I take," and I forget how long, it's like 10 minutes every day. And I count. And then I write down the number and I do it. But I wanted to understand what 1 million was.
Wow.
And all I remember of that, aside from going, actually, that one piece of me being like, "You're crazy," but another piece of me going, that actually makes sense. I mean, it's an inconceivable number, right? There was a time growing up when the idea of being a millionaire meant you had it made.
Yeah. It was up there with being a princess.
Right. So what is a billionaire? I mean, what is the technical definition of a billionaire? A million billion? right? 100 billion? Which is it? Or 100 million?
Yeah.
The numbers are so astronomically huge. We are starting to get into wealth measurement that's going to have to be done in scientific notation. And the thing I think people don't seem to understand is that it's a closed system. It is not well, there's always going to be more money, right? Mm-hmm. Because the more cash you print and insert into it, all it does is devalue the currency, right? This is a closed system. So if we have people who have these billions, that money had to come from others. It's not theirs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to have such huge amounts, to be able to be a multi-billionaire, never mind being a trillionaire, mm-hmm. right, means that 4.8 billion are going without.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, it's really problematic. And one wonders, when are we going to have the needed reconciliation here? Because this cannot continue. It can't. It's gonna break, guys.
Yeah, the pressure is just building and building, and like you said, you wonder, when is it gonna break? I mean, obviously it's gonna be when you write the end of Lazarus, because you clearly write out the future. And
right. Yes,
so basically,
don't put that on me. Don't do that.
But back to the genius of Rucka here. It's so evident every time you start like a chapter, like kind of that new thing, and or a new location, and it says family 1, and then it says surf, and or waste or population. It's just so visual in that inequality, and it just hits you every time you go to a new location, and it's just reinforced. And it's supposed to be fiction, but that's the thing. When I start thinking and comparing, and I see these numbers that came in today, it's very disturbing. But I love that, and I wondered like, when you kind of made the decision to make it where it was family or waste, and I mean, there's such intentional words as well, waste. Mm-hmm. To define people, and that's how the family sees them, or that's what they are, because they're basically
surplus to requirements. Yeah.
And so when you started to kind of come up with that, because in each location it's slightly different as well. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It depends on where you are, and the numbers change, mm-hmm. but and depending on who is in charge, how they view it changes. Hawk does not have waste. You're either a citizen, mm-hmm. or you don't exist, right? You're either a citizen or you're an unperson. You literally are not counted. Mm-hmm. I believe Carragher refers to serfs as workers, right? They're workers. Mm-hmm. I get in there and I do it. Right, we've got a positive spin on that. And the whole gag was that waste was actually not the official term. It worked into the parlance of the serfs and the families, because one of around Macau, one of the husbands of one of the families referred to all these people who were waste. Basically took a look at the equivalent of what had been happening in Portland, and as had been blown up by the media, and said, well, they're just all waste. Like, what are they complaining about?
Yeah, it's such a, not fun, because it's depressing, but it's such a fun comparison.
No, it's not fun.
But it's such an interesting comparison, because we're looking at Hawk, because we're finally getting to where Jonah just got, he's hanging out there, and he's so stupid, but he's just like, well, but then I know what's coming for him. And then I'm like, oh, Greg's able to take this guy that I was like, I don't care what happens to him. And then later in the story, I'm just like crying over what happens to him, right? Like you just
Michael still much to my delight gives me grief about that, because he was like, I don't like him, I don't care, why are we wasting time? And I was like, no, wait for it.
Wait for it.
And look, I think Jonah's journey is very similar to Forever's journey. Right? Jonah is absolutely a fool. I mean, he's absolutely a fool. He is a product of his environment. And his education, I take some hope from that. That he can look, and he has to learn really the hard way.
Yeah.
Right. And one can say he would never have learned otherwise. And you know what? You're right. He never would have learned otherwise. But that doesn't mean that the lesson's not a valid lesson, right? It doesn't mean that it's not legit. I'm very fond of Jonah, actually. But I'm actually very fond of Johanna as well. Because when you meet Johanna, and look, I mean, one of the worst mistakes I made was there's the whole incest.
Yeah, that was disturbing. But I just
and it was there. It was there for a reason. I always feel the need to say, look, it was deliberate.
Yeah,
it was deliberate, coming out of this idea that these are families that never die. And the one thing more than anything else the families covet is their wealth. They're greedy. They don't want to ever have anybody new coming in. So if in particular the Carlyles don't die, there is no need for a new generation.
Right.
And there is no need to basically perpetuate the line outside of the line.
Or share even.
Yeah. And that first issue, those issues were coming out. I hadn't read Game of Thrones.
Right.
And season 1 of Game of Thrones hit at about the same time. And I was like, okay, 2 things have now become clear. One is that HBO is mainstreaming incest. And 2, I can never, ever, ever read or watch Game of Thrones until I'm done with Lazarus.
Right.
Because immediately people were all like, it's like Game of Thrones. And I'm like, all right, you don't
want to
cross-pollinate. Right. I can't risk it. So, yeah, I mean, look, in every adaptation that I've worked on to try to get Lazarus done as a show, but that's the first thing that goes. I mean, I'm like, that's not there. We don't need it. We don't want it. We don't want it. It is unnecessary. Outside of that, like I say, I think, and again, you're talking about later stuff, you don't really start to see it until Risen. Johanna is not without empathy. And that to me is also significant. There is importance to that. She is aware that the system doesn't work and she wants to try to fix it.
Yeah.
But like many people in positions of privilege, she only wants to fix it. She doesn't want to lose what she has to fix it. Right.
Yeah.
There is no question that she still feels she should be running things. And she should have the nice clothes and the nice food and the comfort and so on. And that too is not dissimilar to where we are now. So
yeah, so true. But and to be fair, that's very humanizing in those characters. Like that's why the story reads and connects the way it does, I think, because we can all see a little bit of ourselves in certain characters and go, well, of course I would be that selfish. Like, I do want the best for others, but would I be willing to sleep in a shack every night for that?
To make sure
I don't know about that. Like, I'm not going to pretend I'm a martyr and I'm not, Mother Teresa. I don't have that. And so I think that's, it would be like, so it's hard to believe that's like fairy tale-ish to be so selfless and to be, I mean, but what's so great is in all these characters in the beginning of that journey, by where we're at in it now, you just wouldn't imagine you'd feel the way you feel about a lot of them. Like, some you're on board with right away. Of course, we're all rooting for Forever, no matter what. Like, she's the hero.
Well, I hope so.
We're with her. And, but the ones that are questionable, you take us on this really cool journey. And but yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about that wealth inequality, as well as your choice of words with the waste and all of that, because it's so relevant and it feels so much like what people now with racial injustice especially are fighting for, and not just feeling like either like in Hawk, where they're just non-citizens, they're not even relevant, versus even being waste. Like that, I guess waste is seen as a step up because at least you exist. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I mean, Hawk propaganda thrives on the belief that there is no problem, right? There is no such thing as a non-citizen. The system works.
Right.
My system works. There's no such thing as a non-citizen.
And they're all doped up.
Yeah. Everybody's happy.
Zombie
Everybody's
land.
fine.
Yeah. So crazy. So yeah, and I did get a chance. Like, we posted like a clip of our thing last week, and of course Oscar's like, "Oh, this all reminds me of Hawk," because he just finished reading that too, and all the comments are coming in. It is fascinating to actually be rereading that. So for those who haven't started Lazarus, now's a great time.
Get in there.
Now's a great time as you start to compare everything. And I know that it's not like you didn't create that world necessarily with certain countries in mind, but one can't help but start to draw like parallels. Like, being in Hawk feels like a North Korea, Russia, like feels like a place where propaganda is super heavy. I mean, did you have certain countries in mind as you did the world creating for each of the families, borders?
I mean, it was regional, and it was based in large part on what I was able to find in the records. So Russia was really hard, and I didn't know what I was going to do with the Middle East for a really, really long time. I remember having conversations with Eric Troutman about how the Middle East would have broken up, and really deciding that at one point I was really certain that it was just one great big glowing glass parking lot. Like, it had just gone. Yeah, it had just gotten nuked to hell. I knew that Hawk was always going to be the anti-Carlyle, but a lot of and I knew that it was a farm estate. A lot of the nuance on Hawk was actually introduced by my friends David Walker and Andrew Mackenzie, Robert Mackenzie. I don't know why I said that, but it's David Walker and Robert Mackenzie, not to be confused with David Walker, the Portland comic book artist or writer. And I had a lot of discussions with them because I think they were actually more well versed sort of in, and I had I'm not ignorant on this, but they were really well versed in sort of the propaganda aspects of, in particular, North Korea.
Okay.
And I think they come out of Australia, so I do think proximity has a lot to do with it. They're much more aware, I think, of day-to-day mainland China party control and standards, and certainly North Korea and similar. So that was, I mean, that was a large part of the inspiration. I knew that I wanted, and certain decisions were made just because it'll be fun. Like I couldn't do Armitage and not be like, well, we got to have royalty. Mm-hmm. You've got to have some element of titles and so on, because the privileged class in England that matters to them. They pursue it. Right. And again, I'm speaking broadly. That's not to say everybody.
Of course.
The problem with Russia, right. Yeah. The problem with Russia is it's too damn big. How do you rule something that big? Mm-hmm. That's the Vasilovka problem all along. So, and then, a lot of things like looking at India, for instance, I would do these searches. I would go into the encyclopedia and I would basically be like, oh, what's the largest export here? Or what's the, and that would be, I would look at sort of where the economic power base was. And in some places it was, let's find a more modern power base. Mm-hmm. And in other places it was, no, let's go back to old money. Like, Bittner is, that family line is hundreds of years old. Mm-hmm. Right. It in theory can go back to, Dutch banking, around the Renaissance.
Right.
And then the other thing was I had to make it manageable. Right. I had to make sure that I had enough numbers that I could control, that it wasn't going to spill everywhere. Yeah. I had to be able to get my arms around it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, for the Middle East, it ultimately came down to, it was the idea of the 0 for 0 policy. It was the idea that these two families, one very much Israeli and one of them out of the UAE, basically saying, yeah, we're going to tie our fortunes together. Mm-hmm. And because then this is the thing I kept coming back to, and this is indicatively proven, and it's never proven anywhere more clearly than in Skinner's A Crime So Monstrous. Mm-hmm. People who are perfectly happy to murder each other in their beds because they follow a different prophet or do not accept your prophet, mm-hmm. As the one and true voice of God or whatnot, are more than happy to put aside all your differences if there's money to be made, mm-hmm. Meaning a lot of money to be made, potentially illegal, right? Like I would kill you any other day of the week, but since I've got to move slaves, I've got to traffic people through your territory, and you get a cut and I get a cut, we can stop over that. We can get along. It's fine.
Yeah.
And that was Myers-Kazemi. It was basically Malcolm putting them both in the same room and saying, work it out. Mm-hmm. And them working it out and being like, how, and them basically looking at each other and go like, we could absolutely do this. The opposition we are going to face is going to be religious zealotry. How do we answer it? And the answer being with absolutely no tolerance for it whatsoever, like punitive intolerance of it. You want to blow up something in the name of pick whatever prophet or deity you like, mm-hmm. You're welcome to do it. Be aware that if you do, we will hunt down and kill every member of your family and everybody they know. We will purge it entirely. There is a 0 for 0 policy. You shoot, that's fine. We not only will kill you, we're going to kill everybody you know. We are going to bring such peer pressure and fear to the idea. Mm-hmm. And, we haven't spent time in Myers-Kazemi, so one can't really determine if it worked.
Yeah.
But they are thriving as a family, and as of the latest hardcover, apparently Alima is the most advanced Lazarus to be fielded. So, and she's kind of scary badass.
That's exciting. It's one of the reasons Conclave's one of my favorites, is because it's like all the Lazarus.
I love the poker game.
They all just get to hang out. The poker game is so much fun. And they're just chilling. Yeah. They're like relaxed. It doesn't matter that they would probably kill each other the next day if told to.
Yeah.
Like and one of my favorite sequences is, Sonia and Forever and his name's
Zolani.
Yeah, Zolani. And they're just like, yeah, let's just like spar and train.
Yeah.
And of course the fighting sequence. But it's just the dialogue during it, and just the fact that they're doing all this stuff. I just love that they get to have each other, because they're the only ones who know what it's like to be them. And they have that little group, that support group.
That was precisely it.
It's so cool. It's by far one of my favorites because of it. It's just a lot of fun. It's a nice moment in time that they get. It's like a time capsule. Like, just get this little moment, and it's nice. And of course, Forever and Joaquin. Like, I love that. And
their sweet little moment.
I know. And then you just crush it later.
Yeah, because I'm a bastard. As we know, I'm a bastard.
No. Yeah. So that's definitely going to upset my friend in the book club, because this is what she'll hold on to, even though it's not the main part of the story, but this is what she will hold on to. And it will be a problem. I'm not telling her about it.
No, I will say, I don't begrudge that at all, because I am a romantic.
Yes.
And there are decisions that I make in my stories that do not make me happy as a fan.
All right.
Yeah. The thing is, you don't get to play favorites.
Yeah.
It is what it's got to be. And so
I know, but we like the romantic Greg.
Yes.
But that's what makes those parts so appealing, because you really reel us in, I'll tell you.
I like the romantic too. And I am one. Yes. So yeah.
Yeah, but then it's obviously fueling Forever to do more things. So I get that. It's a huge drive.
We've gotten the occasional letter being like, when's Forever going to do something? And it's like, bear in mind that you don't get inside Forever's head very much. Mm-hmm. You are almost always watching her. And one of the things Michael does so beautifully in his storytelling is that it's very objective. His camera is very objective. It's not a subjective camera. So Forever doesn't talk about her feelings really, except in the very first issue, when she is told, you are supposed to feel this way. So trying to determine what she has, where she is and how she feels as a result of that, is meant to be tricky. Versus Jonah, who it's pretty clear where he is now.
Yeah.
Like you look at him and you're like, yeah, you don't really have a choice here. I will say that Risen 7 is going to be a huge break point. You will know a lot about what Forever wants. Like what for real she has been pursuing.
I see.
It will become clear.
It's so exciting. So
one hopes.
Oh yeah, no, it's super exciting, and I actually love that I'm rereading, because now it's like I'm going deeper into it and like remembering things that kind of play out like ahead of time. And so rereads are always actually important. I think people underestimate the value of rereads, but you catch different, especially in comics, you catch so many different things because you're trying to see the art, you're trying to read, and you want to get to the next page. And
And if it's a long series and so on, there's one guy, Rob, who's been been in on this series since the start, and he's on the Discord, the fan Discord as well. And every so often we'll do a reread, and his eye is excellent. Like he spots callbacks like that. He's like, oh, so this is this related to this? And it's like, stop it. Stop it. Quiet down, you. Stop it. Not so loud.
Right. Yeah. Don't ruin it for everyone else. But yes,
very much.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating, and I love that I'm on that journey again. And so, real quick to Black Magic. Speaking of religion, and speaking of all these journeys, and so it's just one of those that I'm like, well, I never started it yet. I'll start it sometime, and it just seemed like the right time. And Oscar and I were just talking about it, and I basically pushed him to it, like I said earlier, because I need him to slow down on Lazarus. So
I was like, here, read something else, buddy.
Yeah, I was like, just stop. So, but he can't stop. Every time I see him, I'm like, are you reading Lazarus? You need to just stop, because he does it, digitally, and so I'm like, what are you looking at? What's on your?
What is that? Yes. What are you doing?
So he started, and he really loved it because one is he loves detective stories. So when I read it, I go, oh, I think you really, really like this actually, because this is kind of a detective story, and I'm not very far in, but I was like, I think Oscar would be on board. And we just talked about that beginning sequence, which, he's always had kind of a draw to like the pagan arts and witchcraft and that whole thing, because we were both raised very Catholic, in which we both are not very Catholic now, or religious for that matter, but he's always been drawn to it because as a Catholic, that's like the big no-no. And it's just, he said, he loved the Da Vinci Code because of course it has all these theories and things about like the church turned pagan worship into devil worship as a way to get them to, people to turn towards the church. And he wanted to know a little bit about your research into it because it fascinates him so much, but also that beginning scene where they're in the circle and it's all super serious and Oscar's like, where's this going? And then the cell phone rings. Oh my God. We were just talking about the brilliance of that whole sequence and how hilarious.
That whole sequence was designed to be this very timeless thing that you would look at it and you would think, oh, this is meant to be, 800 AD in the woods. Yes. And then the phone rings and it's like, sorry, I gotta take this.
It was classic. And we just spoke about it and he goes, why don't you ask Greg about this? I was like, okay, here's the pros of having your wife get to talk to Greg all the time. He has his own personal questions.
But again, I mean, Black Magic has a very definitive endpoint. I know Nick and I know where the series ends, and one of the things that I wanted, and one of the things that I was drawn to when she and I started working on it was the idea that because it's not a crime book. It is the story about a woman who is a police detective. But is potentially the most powerful witch ever. That if magic is the imposition of the individual's will upon, quote, reality, end quote, Rowan's ability to make reality what she wants it to be is terrifyingly powerful, right? And if she can literally remake the world as she sees fit, then it becomes a question of, well, never mind, should she be able to? Can she be trusted to be able to? And of course, there are other people who either want her to do it for them or don't want it done at all. And that's sort of the core plot, right? There were some early reads on the, where I was working out the series that are very dark. There were going to be some things that happened that I have abandoned, thankfully, just because I don't think I could have written them. And going into it, it mattered to me to try to research the faith with all the respect I could. That there is it's not meant to be judgmental, and that it was important, and something I encountered fairly early, that a lot of what we refer to as Wiccan isn't actually. It's sort of this Crowley witchcraft movement that began, in the early 20th century and sort of grew out from there as a rediscovery of these ancient traditions, but that the core, a lot of this stuff is lost, and a lot of this stuff is muddied, and a lot of this stuff is muddled. And so I really did want to be sort of, I don't want to say I have a light touch, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to disparage anybody's faith.
Right.
Anybody's faith in it. Meaning it didn't matter if you were the Roman Catholic priest or if you were, quote unquote, the witch coming out of an East African culture, right? And that there is a universal spirituality at work. The issue of magic is a separate one. And that there are those who conflate them. So, but I mean, I've got you can't see it here, but there's literally a shelf full of the witchcraft books. Everything from Wicca for Dummies to 101 Spells to
that was the thing too, because he's like, okay, it's cast in this light as XYZ, and he feels that maybe it just gets really bad press because of the power of some of these other religions that have cast it in such light. And that's why he's so curious, because he's like, I bet.
Well, I mean,
he was like, ask Greg, not to put it, I'm going to put it wrong, but it's not like it's just another religion. But he's like, it's probably no different in terms of traditions and what one believes. Like it's another belief system, right? And so, like you just said, they should get as much respect as any other. But if they don't,
and the core at work here, and this is recurrent throughout the series, is and in fact it's so core without this series that we're just putting the third trade paperback to bed this week, and the quote on the back is do what ye will, but the rest of that is less it, let it harm none, right? The threefold read here is at the heart of it. You and threes are always very vital in the occult, in arcane practice, but you're free to use your will and your ability, but the good that you do will come back to you 3 times, and so will the ill. And if that means that it comes back to you 3 times as good, or 3 times as bad, or literally it will happen to you 3 times, where we are in the series right now, Rowan's come off the rails, and the system that she operates in kind of demands that there's going to be a bill for that. So yeah, it's we are about halfway through that story now with the issue that came out last week.
Okay, so that's good.
We're about halfway through.
It's a good time to jump on board. But it's that, and also listeners always have questions about your research process. Like that, people find the research part of this so fascinating. Like you just said, oh, I have a book of spells, and I guess.
Yeah, but most of them are crap. I mean, most of them are crap. This One of the tricks in research is learning to, you have to have a really good bullshit detector.
Okay.
Because, some books are written, 101 love potions, and it's like, put some, and you look at it and you're like, okay, that's sweet and that's cute and this is not for me. And there's other stuff where you can dig in and you can be like, so no, there's an anthropological history here.
Okay.
Or this is, this is less Eye of Newt and, more literally talking about the herbs you're using and why. But I learned that lesson really early on with regards to research. When I was doing the first Kodiak book, even before I was doing the Kodiak book, I was trying to find research on personal protection. I got a book by a guy named Leroy Thompson called Dead Clients Don't Pay. And quite literally, if you were to do any of the things this man says as a professional bodyguard, you'd end up dead. I mean, the book existed. My conclusion when I had finished it was this book exists as propaganda for the enemy, right?
Right.
Either that or the guy's just not a bodyguard, but he's making a living pretending.
Wow.
So then the other thing, just as far as the research goes, is I always, if I can, I'll go to primary resources. And when I started working on black magic, Elliot was in school with a girl whose mom was Wiccan, identified as Wiccan, practiced. So I had long conversations with her about, is this right? Am I getting this right? Explain this to me.
Yeah.
Because I really did not want, as I said, I did not want to, I don't, let's not overstate it. Regardless of whether or not I shared that faith, I wasn't going to be the guy. I had no interest in saying right, wrong, or whatever. It was give it the respect it's due. I'm not there, and I was going to say the reason why I didn't want to overstate it is that I always try, but I don't always try. If I've got a freaking skinhead in one of my books, I'm not going to try to find the legitimacy of his position. All right, it isn't.
Yeah,
there isn't. There is not. But most of the witches and warlocks you're going to meet are people who move through the world very actively trying to do good works, right? It is not about power or, it's none of this. There is no, and now I'm going to sacrifice the goat and, pray to Satan. That's not there.
Right.
It's not there.
Yeah.
It's just not there. So
but those are all the stereotypes that people.
Well, and I think Oscar is
right.
Right, but Oscar is absolutely correct, because if you look at it and you go, okay, so if you're a pagan, how can you worship Satan?
Right.
No, seriously. I mean, just stop right there and ask the question. If you are out there, so okay, so then what kind of witch are you? Right? So I mean, the whole thing starts to fall apart. And it's been interesting just from a sociological thing to look at attempts to reclaim it as a positive force, because at its root, what Wicca wants is an acknowledgement of our spiritual lives as connected to the natural world and the cycles of the natural world around us. It is an environmentally, ecologically sound religious basis to everything. There is a season, right? And we want to promote these things and help them.
Yeah.
And a custodianship of what we have and the spirit of the world in it. And how can you look at that and have a problem with it? You know what I mean?
Because there's those goats that are getting sacrificed, Greg, obviously.
Right. Well, the Goat Preservation League maybe has a leg to stand on. But even sacrificing the goat is what I mean. It's not. That's not what's done.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
but yeah, it's really fun. And so obviously I'm going to put the listeners in the next couple weeks because I think it'll be a nice December-y thing for us to have listener questions on the work that you do. And although I'm sure they love hearing us only talk about current events, and it's fascinating to be able to.
It's nice. Isn't it nice to have had a week where we haven't had to?
Yes. I mean, and on a positive note, my mom called today and she was like, "I'm so proud. I'm really happy." I'm like, "What's going on?" She's like, "Did you see who Biden picked in his administration? They actually know what they're doing for their jobs." Not like that other idiot. So it was real funny. But I mean, there's glimmers of hope. We're getting there.
It's the difference between wanting to preserve institutions and trying to destroy them. Absolutely.
For sure.
And I mean, that's what the Republicans got out of Trump was the destruction of a lot of our institutions.
Yep.
So now we got
to go undo it. We have to undo all that. So
I am still waiting to hear who's CIA.
Yeah. Drum roll.
That's going to be real important. And I'm kind of hoping they'll convince Leon Panetta to come out of his retirement.
Okay.
But
we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you had always mentioned, and I know we're going to wrap up here, but because I was so worried several weeks ago, and you're like, well, at the very least, the military is there for this reason. And then if the judicial fails us, but I mean, at least some things are holding up institutionally speaking, it's been refreshing. Now people may be disappointing us constantly, and that goes without saying.
I'll do it.
But it's refreshing that they're just dismissing it. They're just dismissing all these things. And
they're not
playing at all. Yeah. They're just like, nope. So that's been a relief. But I know this is going to air after, but even so, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving, but most importantly, happy birthday.
Thank you. Very sweet of you. You give my love to the family.
Likewise. And tell Jen to have a very safe trip. And
I will. And we'll talk next week, barring, catastrophic anything regarding the dog.
Yes. No, it's going to be great. So thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Cheers.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.